Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Women's Soccer Show. I'm Sarah.
And I'm Allie.
And it is international break, everybody.
I will never get excited at this. Just so everybody's aware, I will never get excited at this.
The first thing Allie wanted to talk about on this episode is how we shouldn't have international break. And if you think I'm joking, I'm not. I literally received a text from Allie being like, I think we need to talk about how we shouldn't have this April international break. And for the record, we are going to talk about it, but it's in the scope of a different issue, a larger conversation, not just how Allie doesn't like international break. Allie, what's on the docket today?
On the docket today, we are going to talk about international break and specifically some certain players that didn't travel with their teams. We've got to get into that whole mess of a situation. And about what that all means.
Deep
Sorry,
sigh.
Sarah, that's going to be quite painful for
It's
you.
painful for all of us.
Then we are going to talk about the hot topic that is hitting certain European, and I will say it is a very European-centric thought of should the April international break be cancelled? And I'll give you all of my reasons why, and it's not just because I don't like it. And we, as ever, we take you around the world, and we're going to discuss it's around the world Nations League edition, and we'll give you an overview of what happened in those different groups. And then finally, we have got such a cool interview for you. We spoke to Sarah Knapp, who is a sports psychologist, and about her work and how she worked with Northampton women and how she set up in private practice and what sports psychology can bring to athletes. It was so fun and so interesting, and we cannot wait for you to hear that.
But before we get into all of that, Allie, big news. Speaking of international break, let's talk about international FIFA soccer news. The Women's World Cup, we all know, will be hosted in Brazil in 2027, but we did not have the host countries for the following two after that. So that would be the 2031 and 2035. And it was announced that the US will host the 2031 World Cup, barring, dictatorship, so on and so forth, world wars. It's not something to laugh about. It's just the honest truth. And then, honestly, I think I'm most excited for this one. The UK was the sole bidder for the 2035 Women's World Cup. So we know that after Brazil, it will come to the US and then it'll go to the UK. I'm really pumped.
I'm really excited by that. I think one of my favorite memes that came out of all this was the fact that they're saying that all of your favorites will have retired except for Lucy Bronze.
Yeah.
Lucy Bronze is gonna keep on going. She's gonna do a martyr. She's just gonna keep on going.
I mean, it's really impressive how much speed she still has. People say that you lose speed when you hit a certain age. I don't know what age that is. I think it's 35 or maybe a little earlier than that. Lucy Bronze seems to be getting faster with every single year that she plays. But for real, how pumped are you?
I'm so excited because the Euros, and you came over for the Euros, was such a great time for women's football in England, and they're going to do it to the UK. So we reckon that Scotland, Wales, maybe even Northern Ireland are going to get involved as well, which means we're going to be able to spread it further. But it ain't going to be that hard of a travel because we've got that network. So I'm so pumped that we're bringing the World Cup to the UK. I'm so excited.
This is the first time the Women's World Cup is coming to the UK.
Yeah, we've hosted the Euros a bunch of times, but yeah, this is the first time that the World Cup will be here.
Yeah, this is the third time now the US is going to host it. 1999, of course, which we all remember. And then they hosted back-to-back. They hosted in 2003 as well.
There you go. I knew about 99, didn't know about 2003. So we aren't going to go into specific games as such with international break because there was so much outside of the games that hit that we wanted to talk to you about that was more timely, more interesting, that we felt. And one of the big things that have come out of international break is Zambia withdrew 4 of their key players for their international tournament because they are playing in the NWSL. And the reason is they don't believe that the players would get back into the USA after playing in the tournament due to the current, and we use this in quotation marks, travel restrictions and travel measurements that have been introduced by the current president.
Yeah, the use of, quote, travel measures was used by the Zambian national team, and so that's why we use it here. But yeah, I mean, you said it all. So basically, the Zambia national team is headed to China. They're playing a tournament for international break. in China. There are 4 Zambian players who were called up to the Zambian national team who play their professional soccer in the NWSL here in the United States. And that's Barbara Banda, Rachel Kundananji, Priska Chilufya, and Grace Chanda. Everybody plays for Orlando Pride except for Rachel Kundananji, who plays for Bay FC. So that's 4 players who earned a spot on the Zambian national team. And there have been, as we all know, a lot of illegal deportations, and people, including student visas, are getting revoked. People are getting kicked out of the country, even though they're rightfully here. And so there was a lot of fear, rightfully so, that if these 4 players left the U.S. to go play for their national team, they would not be able to re-enter the country and play for their club team. And that is such a real concern and so heartbreaking. Players should not have to choose between their club and their country, which is what these players were forced to do. Now, their country team is worse off because of it. They don't get the honor of playing for their country, which they very well earned. And it extends well beyond this, right? Then you think about how this is going to extend into their lives. They can't go home. I just got to talk to a couple of them about how they went home and they saw their families in the off season. They probably can't do that in this coming off season if they want to continue to play in the NWSL. It extends so much further than this, and it's not just this like one-time issue. And we've talked already, Allie, about how the U.S. politics were going to affect the NWSL and stop big players from coming here. And here is a great example of it. There's going to be so many things, and this is just one of them. And if I was Barbara Banda, I would very seriously reconsider where I play football, because she now has the option. If she wants to go to the WSL, she can go to the WSL. Like, no question about it. And if I were her, I absolutely would.
Yeah, there's been rumors that other players, Schwinger, for example, there's rumors that she's going to come over to Lyon and come to Europe.
That would be funny, though, because obviously her Schwinger's sister plays for PSG. So it's funny that she wants to go to Lyon.
But that's the current rumor, and to be honest, I wouldn't blame her.
Yeah.
It's the honest answer.
Not at all. I almost would prefer that for them, because at least then they can travel safely and feel good about their ability to leave and re-enter the country in which they reside.
Yeah, we talked about the fact the US have got this honour that they're going to be hosting the World Cup in 2031. They are also hosting the Men's World Cup, which I believe is next year.
God, yeah. I forgot about that, Allie. Also the Olympics. Also the Olympics. And we're not an all sport podcast, but it's just something to bear in mind to see how that is going to play out, because that is going to have an effect on the NWSL in the immediate future, as well as the US soccer system for women as a whole, of how that's going to work. It's scary. It's scary times. It's terrifying. And I keep trying to say, like, I don't want to bring my politics in it, but when we decided to do this podcast, Allie, we were like, we're not going to shy away from these topics that other people in the mainstream media like really don't want to address. And this is the reality of the situation of where we are in the United States. And it has descended into full authoritarianism, essentially. And the question marks around what the future holds are massive. And so if I was a player in the NWSL, I would get the out of here. Sorry. Let's bleep that F word, Mike. I only read about this happening with Zambian national team players, but I can only assume it must have been happening with others. But, I mean, there's obvious racism involved in this as well, where you talk about an African country and those African players probably being given some of the most trouble re-entering the country. But I don't know what's going on with, for example, you want to talk about, like, racism. I don't know what's going on with any, like, Mexican national team internationals who play in the NWSL or so on and so forth. I haven't read that their national teams have been taking the same measures with them. Have you seen anything on that?
No, Zambia's the big one, is the one that has made this decision. Because it was more of a tournament over there. I think we'll probably see it more in the summer when there is other tournaments that are going on that could affect these players. For example, the Women's Euros are happening. So are we going to have this issue with European players that play in the NWSL getting pulled from playing for their country? Time will tell. Time will tell.
Sorry to start off with a damper, everybody, but it's big news, so we needed to address it. All right, let's talk about this April international break, or April FIFA window is, I guess, technically what it is referred to. Because Allie, we had a bit of this conversation over text, but I'm excited to extend it further. You brought this up by saying this window should be canceled. Tell us why.
Yeah, and I would like to point out, this is not just my I don't like international break. It's not that at all. Honestly, it's not.
It's not. I'm just giving you a hard time. I know this.
Yeah, it's not. For anybody who doesn't know, and this is, like I said, it's a very European-centric viewpoint, but we are coming into the clutch of European leagues right now. We are coming into the final. There are 4 games left of the WSL. We have got Champions League semi-final and Champions League final. So everything is to play for. Everything is coming to a head as we speak in this next month. And then we have this weird international break, which has been cancelled for the men. The men in Europe don't play this anymore. They used to. They don't play this anymore because of this reason.
For this exact reason, yeah.
For this exact reason, multiple players have come back early from international break because of injury, whether it be slight niggles, be it, or something more serious, which affects their club football. This is going to affect their team's chances of winning a league, a Champions League. We've still got the FA Cup to go. We've got the semi-finals. They're happening this weekend.
Quick question. You said the men don't play this international break anymore. That's just the European men. The rest of the world for men still play this international break.
I believe so.
Okay, so your essential proposal is for that same structure to be implemented on the women's side, where everybody else should, but maybe Europe doesn't because of what you're... Well, I mean, I agree with you. This is a key moment, right? Because...
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's a key time for European football because everything's coming to an end. The NWSL's only just started. We're, 3 games in? So if a player picks up a slight hamstring issue that takes them out for 2 weeks, it's not the end of their season. It's not the end of their club season. They can still go on and ahead and think. Alessia Russo has picked... I think Alessia Russo's is an ankle, and we'll go through the thing. Lauren James is a hamstring. That can take him out for 5-6 weeks.
Let's rip through everybody because I feel like the impetus of this is that so many English players got hurt in this international break. So let's run through who is on the injury list right now from this international break.
Yeah, so Alessia Russo has been brought home because of an ankle injury. If anybody watched the Belgium game, you'll see she got tackled. And Kate McCabe has been pulled back for a hamstring issue, though Carla Ward did say she didn't think it was that serious, and if Arsenal didn't have the run of games that they did, she probably could have stayed in camp, but they've made the decision to send her home. Daphne van Domselaar, the Arsenal goalkeeper, again, it was a bit of a rough tackle. She's brought home because of an injury, and again, it looks like she's going to be out for a couple of weeks. Chloe Kelly, again, has withdrawn from England camp because of some issues with muscles. And then on the Chelsea side, Lauren James has been pulled back because of a hamstring issue that she picked up during the England game against Belgium. And just to keep it fair, for the NWSL, everybody saw the Alana Kennedy lump.
If you haven't, go search for it, because the only thing that's funny about this is that Alana Kennedy has a infamous video from, at this point, probably 10 years ago or something, where she clearly breaks her nose in a game, and then she looks up at the big screen at the Jumbotron and sees her nose, and you get to watch her react to seeing her nose for the first time, and it's absolutely hilarious. And something very similar, almost like mirror image, just happened. The craziest big bruise on her cheek that I've seen in a while. That was wild. Yeah,
it looks fake.
But to be fair, I mean, the moment I saw how many Arsenal players were injured, I personally got deeply upset because of what you just said. This is a key moment. This is the end of the WSL season, and we are entering Champions League semifinals. So for a team like Arsenal, for example, Alessia Russo, we all know how key she was. I mean, Arsenal wouldn't even be in the semifinals if it wasn't for Alessia Russo. Katie McCabe, starting goalkeeper, Daphne van Domselaar, possibly the most important person on this list for Arsenal. And then Chloe Kelly, all of them in a starting 11, all of them picking up injuries. So I get where you're coming from in terms of this just completely changed the course of Arsenal's season, potentially.
Yeah, and it's the same with Chelsea in their Champions League, because Lauren James is key, and that's somebody you want playing up against the Barcelona defence. And even if it's not as serious as they think it is, they still reckon she's going to be out for 2 to 3 weeks, which means she will miss the first leg. She will miss that first leg against Barcelona, at Barcelona, which is arguably the hardest leg. And it's not good for players as well, because they are going to keep picking up these injuries and they're going to be overworked. Because if you looked at the England lineup for the Belgium game, and remember they play on Tuesday and we record on a Monday, so therefore we don't know what the lineup's going to be for the second game. But it was very heavy Chelsea players. It was very heavy focus because Lauren James was there, Agbeva Jones, Lucy Bronze, Kira Walsh, all made that starting or came on for those moments. And they've already had a massive run of games, and they've got another massive run of games coming up. And national coaches' first priority, yes, they do care about player safety and well-being, but their first priority is going to be the international games. Serena doesn't care that Chelsea have got a Champions League semi-final. She doesn't care that Arsenal have got this. What she cares about is that England qualify for the next World Cup, which is what these Nation League games are for. It's for qualification for the next tournament, because we've already qualified for the Euros.
Yeah, it's a very different position than, like, say, Emma Hayes is in right now, where Emma Hayes doesn't have, obviously, we've qualifications for a World Cup, but also Emma Hayes doesn't have a huge international tournament coming up, where the Lionesses are also trying to get ready for Euros, which happen in, 2 months, 3 months. So it's different. I will say, when you first brought this up, my initial reaction was that you were saying, look at how many injuries, this should be canceled. And my initial reaction was to say that I think that this could be said about most international breaks. Like, it's a larger conversation about how the FIFA calendar it never aligns well with all leagues. I mean, we can talk about how the World Cup happens dead in the middle of the NWSL season. You know, that doesn't work well for leagues either. It certainly impacts teams and the outcome that they have and the season that they have and so on and so forth. So that was my initial reaction to this. I wouldn't mind if Europe was like, hey, we're not going to play the international window here. I don't care.
Yeah. Question. The NWSL, if you guys move to align with ours, is yours that you would have games cancelled because of weather?
Yeah. It's just impossible. Unless people want to play inside. It snows in way too many parts of the country for way too long for us to play that window.
Because it's never going to align unless every federation has the same calendar. It's never going to align. But I just wondered with you guys if it was because you guys have extreme weather.
It's the weather, definitely. Yeah, I feel like the NWSL, if they could, they would have started with a season that aligned to the European calendar for sure. It's just impossible with the weather here. It is, to sum it up, just a big bummer to see all of these injuries, and it's an ongoing issue. You mentioned it happened in the men's game, so it seems like it's just an ongoing issue, period, not just with the women's game. This is like a load issue in terms of how many games we're asking of all of these players. I mean, they're playing year-round. There's no off-season for them. And your body needs an off-season. You can ask anybody in medicine. You can't go at 100% 24/7. You need to give your body a break and then get back in shape, and that's the healthiest way to do it. And these players just aren't afforded that opportunity. And there's only so much they can take. Let's go around the world. Around the world, around the world. Nations League edition.
To Group 1, a massive result for Germany with a 5-0 win over Scotland takes them to the top of their group. Hot on their heels, however, are the Netherlands, who are second with a slightly less goal differential after their win against Austria.
To Group 2, France are 3 for 3 in top of Group 2 after their narrow win over Switzerland. Second place, Norway could only manage a 0-0 draw against Iceland.
Group 3 and England are in the top spot after their 5-0 win over Belgium. Spain are close behind with 6 points after their win over Portugal. Belgium do remain in the bottom spot, having lost all 3 matches so far.
And finally, to Group 4, Sweden beat Italy in a very tight game to retain the top spot in Group 4. Wales are propping up Group 4 with 1 point after a very narrow loss to Denmark. Nations League continues on Tuesday, April 8th.
And to finish off this episode, we have this wonderful interview with Sarah Knapp. Now, Sarah has been working as a sports psychologist for the last few years, and she came on to talk to us about why this is so important for teams and players to have, why it's being overlooked by teams, and what she thinks is the best thing for players. It was such a great chat. I can't wait for you guys to hear it. Sarah can't wait for you guys to hear it. So please listen to our chat with Sarah Knapp.
We are joined by Sarah Knapp, sport and exercise psychologist and founder of Mindset for Performance. Sarah, thank you so much for being here.
No worries. It's great to be here.
So before we jump into everything that sports psychology entails, I guess Allie and you met in person. Let's give a shout out to whatever I think you two met at a networking event. Where did you two meet? How did you get connected?
So we met in a women in football event that was set up by good old Charles, who has been on our podcast before, did the LGBT Dragons and the network over there in the Wales one. And yeah, we just went to a great event, met a lot of great people. And then, I was just there handing out business cards, being like, come on my podcast, come on my podcast.
Wonderful. Yeah, we got to give a shout out. Women in football over in the UK and then women in soccer here in the US. And if you're listening and you're interested in getting into the women's soccer space, just look those up. And they host networking events all over both countries, in England and in the US. So check those out. Sarah, we are so pumped, if I didn't already say this, to have you. So let's just dive right into sports and exercise psychology, because that is specifically the title of what you do. And I think most people hear that and they have an idea kind of what that is on the surface. But maybe if you could please explain specifically, or as specifically as you can, what does it mean to be a sport and exercise psychologist?
Okay, so I guess for me, my aim is to support athletes to reach their next level of performance, whatever that looks like for them. So that could entail working on an athlete to help improve their confidence. It could be about helping them to manage their emotions, or helping them to learn skills to perform under pressure. So it can look quite different depending on like the setting or the context that I'm working in. But essentially what I do is basically talking to athletes and really listening them and trying to understand what's actually going on in their mind that might be leading to some of those issues that I alluded to.
Before we dig into that, I want to keep focusing on the background for a second. So can you maybe share a bit about your journey and what led you to want to work in this field specifically?
Yeah, I kind of took a roundabout way of getting here a little bit. So I did psychology for my undergrad, and all my friends sort of started getting placements in NHS settings. And I thought, well, okay, that's what you do with a psychology degree. So I was pursuing a career in clinical psychology to start off with. So I had quite a bit of experience working in mental health services and public health services. And then I started to just evaluate, like, is this really the right pathway for me? I really enjoyed what I did, but at times it was just getting tedious, especially how competitive it was to kind of get onto the doctorate to become a clinical psychologist. And so I then just kind of sat down and just really looked at all of my options. And at that time, this was quite a while ago, I didn't even realize that you could be a sport and exercise psychologist. It was like a new thing for me, a new kind of concept. So I started looking into it. And the more I looked into it, the more I was like, wow, this just seems really right for me. Exercise has always been a massive part of my life. Yeah, really big fan of sport, playing, watching, that kind of thing. So I just thought it kind of aligned my two passions of helping other people, helping people to reach their goals, and being able to use my skills to help athletes to do that.
So when we met at the event, you talked about that your last role was with Northampton Town, specifically with their women's team. Do you want to give us a bit of history on how that worked for you over at Northampton? Because they're in what, division 4, 5?
Yes, 4. Yeah,
there we go, the division 4.
Yeah. So yeah, like I say, I kind of switched into deciding to pursue the route of sport and exercise psychology, and then kind of learning that actually takes a few years as well to become fully qualified. So I did my master's, which is a requirement, and then there's another 2 or 3 years of training after that, where you have to kind of build up so many applied hours. So yeah, that's the point where I was basically kind of looking for work that I could do with athletes, and I was contacting different clubs, and I got in touch with the Northampton women's team, spoke to the women and girls officer that was working there, and we had a really good chat, and she was really interested in the sports psychology side of things as well. Initially, they did already have a psychologist who was working with the team, so I was a little bit gutted at first. And then a couple of months later down the line, that psychologist had kind of moved on. So I spoke to one of the joint managers and we had a chat, and he was really keen to kind of have me come along. So I started working with them at the start of the 22-23 season and just finished with them just at Christmas time last year.
Awesome. And then right now you run the practice that you founded, Mindset for Performance. When did you found that, and what type of clientele do you work with? You specify to women's footballers? Is it amateur, professional, everything? What do you do?
Yeah, so again, I sort of founded that not too long after working with the football team, because like I said, I needed to build up a lot of applied hours for my training. So and also the assessors look for a lot of varied work and different experiences. So I thought it makes sense to kind of do some one-to-one work as well on the side. So I kind of set that up a couple of years ago just to give me a bit of experience of working with a whole range of different athletes. So yeah, it has been quite a variety, working from grassroots levels, from people like of teenager right all the way up to adults in a range of different sports. So I'm still continuing that now. My role with Northampton was unpaid, which was one of the factors of kind of moving on. I did also move to a different part of the country as well, so it all kind of made sense for me to sort of just focus on my own career progression, and it was just the right time for me to kind of move on from that. So yeah, at the moment I've got my private practice where I'm working with still a range of different athletes, but I do get contacted by a lot of football players in particular, from different levels. So sometimes it might be that someone's really trying to kind of get to that next level, whether it be to make it into an academy or to play it for as high level as they can. I had one younger player who came to see me because I think something knocked her confidence a little bit, and she just kind of lost that enjoyment that she once had when she used to play. And so she was actually finding it quite hard to get motivated to go to training, and she just wanted to get that spark back. So yeah, she was a really lovely player to work with.
You mentioned, a player who came to you who lost the joy, a player who lost confidence. Are there one or two things that seem to be most common that players approach you with, or does it really seem like it is, very varied?
To be honest, yeah, like when I've been reflecting on the work I do, quite often the initial stage, the player that's coming to see me, what they present with initially can be quite a lot different. But actually, when you start doing the work with them, there are some common themes that come up. So yeah, like a drop in confidence is really common, and something that you do notice in athletes, and they might not always be aware of that themselves. But yeah, once you start doing the work and digging a bit deeper, it's a lot that their confidence has been knocked, or they feel quite anxious actually when they go out on the pitch. And then managing emotions is also one that is quite common as well, especially kind of getting frustrated with other people or with your own performance as well. Like again, people that are kind of pushing themselves and they kind of put this pressure on themselves to succeed, and they're focusing like purely on the outcomes. That brings a whole host of emotions that can be really difficult to deal with.
I imagine that's where the interesting part for you comes in, because then the solution for each person, even though the problem may present similarly, is going to be radically different, right?
Absolutely, yeah. There's no one size fits all approach. Yeah, there's a whole range of different like tools that you can use with athletes, but it is all about what works for them, what fits best with their lifestyle, with what they're doing, and what they kind of feel comfortable with.
All right. So my second question, you mentioned your role was unpaid. Do you feel like right now the role of a sports psychologist is still undervalued, maybe in terms of like even just undervalued in the sense of like, pure intrinsic, how people think about it, but also undervalued in terms of pay, where people aren't necessarily willing to pay for this thing that might actually help elevate not just a player, but an entire team to a completely other level?
Yeah, definitely. I think it is really undervalued. It's hard when you're training to become a sports psychologist, because like I said, you need to get those hours, and it is very competitive, but a lot of the time you do have to take that unpaid work. But yeah, particularly, like I said, I worked with a tier 4 women's team, and actually none of the staff were paid. There wasn't that resource, there wasn't that funding there for anyone to get paid, which was a real shame because it was such a great environment to work in. The staff were so passionate. They put in all the hours, even though it was purely voluntary. But I mean, I think sports psychology is one of those things that is just kind of that one or two steps behind, the other kind of sports science disciplines. And so I think across a lot of sports, it is quite undervalued. But certainly in women's football, there are some sports psychologists I know of that kind of work in women's academies and in some of the higher teams, but you don't hear about it very often at all. And again, like hearing the experience of some of the people that have actually contacted me to come and have private sessions, it just seems like it's just not widely available to them.
That's crazy to me that tier 4 is unpaid.
Yeah.
Like, because it's not that far down the food chain.
It's not, no. And again, like as a club, we did have a lot of difficulty with that at times, because actually some of the clubs in tier 4 were getting paid at some level, but so there was obviously quite a discrepancy like within the league itself.
We're going to talk about now what you actually do when you get involved with a team. So first and foremost, you've been hired by Northampton, Jose, to come in. What does that mean? Does that mean that you meet with all players, all coaches for initial things, or is it that certain players will go, I have an issue, I would like to talk to you? How does it all work when you first get set up within a team?
I mean, again, it's a really tricky one. I didn't know hugely what to expect when I first walked onto the pitch either. And the work entails, I guess, a lot of the work that I did was around kind of creating a kind of supportive environment, what we would kind of term as psychologically safe. So actually certainly the first few months, and even like ongoing from that, a lot of what I did was actually observational work. So actually, if you saw me at training and if you saw me at matches, you'd probably think, what on earth is that girl doing there? Like, she's not doing a lot, she's just standing there. But yeah, that observational work was actually really important as part of my role. It gave me a huge insight into how players behaved, how coaches behaved, what their interactions were like. I could start to kind of understand what was going on behind the scenes. And that just helped me, I guess, to kind of like map out where the support was needed as well, particularly kind of for that team environment. In terms of, I guess, individual player work, that started to come along a little bit later on, because it did take time to kind of build those connections, like as you need with any kind of role. But I think particularly with a sports psychologist, I can't remember if you said earlier, but there are these misconceptions about who a sports psychologist is, what they do. Is it a sign of weakness because I'm talking to a sports psychologist, that whole stigma around it. So it's particularly important to kind of really build that trust and that rapport with players before, actually starting to do work with them. So for me, again, just being around at training, it was just important for me to be able to just have general conversations with players, just to chat with them, get to know them. Again, that still gave me a huge insight into what was going on for them, even though it wasn't like a formal session. But yeah, so that kind of developed. I worked with Northampton Town for 2.5 seasons. So yeah, the longer I was there, the more they got to know me, the more they got to trust me. And that kind of allowed them to open up and talk a little bit more openly about their issues. But that's not to say that everyone still felt comfortable to do that, because there are going to be some players where, that buy-in, it just isn't as easy as it is for other players. And a lot of the time I would have felt more comfortable if players would just choose to come and speak to me rather than be forced or be told to. But yeah, sometimes some of them just needed a little bit of a nudge. And again, like I said, every player is different. So it doesn't necessarily mean that if one player, if I was speaking to them on a weekly or a fortnightly basis, it doesn't mean that that's the same as what another player needed. They might just need like a quick chat or a quick check-in here and there. So yeah, it looked quite different each week as well, actually, which makes the role quite fun and quite exciting.
So it sounds like you're influencing like culture on a broader basis in working with players and coaches. Is that right? Or coaches just
so actually a big part of my work did entail working quite closely with the coaches. So like I say, that observational work I was doing, I shared a lot of feedback with the coaches to kind of give them my point of view of what was going on.
Is that to help them understand players on an individual level, like how we can help, how you can best coach this player, or like, hey, I think that you're doing XYZ and that seems to elicit a positive reaction from your players, or you're doing XYZ and that seems to be like pretty toxic, for lack of a better term?
Yeah, so a little bit of both, but probably more so the latter. So yeah, I'd kind of point out, like, I think what you're doing here is really great and is having a really good influence. But and I guess with the areas I would just try and be more curious and try and ask them more questions about, why are things done in this way? Like, where did this come from? Like, so for example, every time we went to a match, there'd be like all these bits of paper up on the wall, and they'd put up a piece of paper with the team's values on. Sometimes they would refer to it, sometimes they wouldn't. And it got to a stage where I was kind of like, well, what do these values really mean? Like, where did they come from? Why are they there? And that kind of led the coaches to then start to think about that themselves and actually say, well, actually, that's been there for quite a few years now. So perhaps we do need to refresh it with the players and actually have their input on it so that they actually truly believe in them.
This sounds so fast. I'm like so fascinated by all of this.
Yeah, me too. We're going to keep you here. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, we're going to keep you here. You're going to come back every week. So what would you say some of the biggest challenges that you face when you come into a role, either when it's clients that come to you individually or when you've been in like a team environment? Is it trying to get people to open up? Is it trying to get people to adapt what you're saying to them?
Yeah, I think, you've alluded to a couple of challenges there already. Like I say, player buy-in was really hard initially. So yeah, I guess something that I did learn, this was kind of like my first real experience of working in a team, but I learned how important it is to kind of set expectations about what it is that I do, what I'm there for, why I might just be stood at the side of pitch throughout the whole training session. Yeah, so buy-in can be a challenge. I guess the other main challenge as well was, I guess, logistics in a way. So, like once I'd done all that observational work and I'd been there for a few months, I had lots of ideas around what I wanted to do with the team and what I felt could have a really positive influence, and some team workshops and things like that. But then it was a case of having the time to do it. Again, being at tier 4 level, most of these players had day jobs. They were working throughout the day. They were coming to training in the evening. Trying to get them to training earlier could be quite a struggle for some of those players. Having a space to be able to deliver those workshops at times was quite difficult. So I guess, just kind of being able to implement what I wanted to do could be quite difficult. And I guess the other thing as well, especially when talking to individual players, is that they only had a few hours of training each week, 2 nights a week. They came to training to play football. So actually trying to get them to talk to me, I knew that they always wanted to be back out on the pitch. So sometimes when I did kind of speak to players at the side or in another room, I could see that they were like edging to get back out, or they were freezing cold. They just wanted to get warm again.
That is the logistics sound like the hardest part, where it's like it's not really fair to ask them to choose between getting to play football or speak to you. The two should go, hand in hand.
Yeah.
All right. So I guess, well, I'll geek out for a second, and this could go nowhere. And I promise, I said to you before, I'm not trying to get a free session, but I do think that the best way for people to best understand and almost maybe like to destigmatize what it really does look like to work with a sports psychologist is to like kind of show them what it might look like. And let's not do therapy. I'm not ready for that. But I am curious. Like, I think people can like picture the moment where, maybe they'll walk into a room and they'll sit down, and tell me if I'm wrong here. It sounds like you'll ask them like how things are going on the pitch, and let's say somebody just comes out and outright says like, hey, things have been hard recently. I said to you before we recorded, like this, I think the mental side of the game was the hardest part for me. I was one of the players that, like, I put way too much pressure on every single game. Like, it was the amount of pressure on the performance that then resulted in like the opposite of the outcome that you want, where it's like too much pressure equals a bad performance. And when I was younger, my answer to that was like more pressure is probably the answer to that, which was wrong for those of you listening. But let's say somebody comes in and sits down and is like, I can't get out of my own head. Like, I'm judging myself on every single play, on every single move. I'm not like in the flow of the game. I'm just in my head and assessing myself at every single moment. Where does it go from there?
So yeah, like I said before, it's always about in those initial stages of speaking with an athlete, it's about trying to understand more about that issue that they're presenting with. So I'd be asking them lots of open questions. So for example, like, when did that start happening? When have you noticed that that's become a problem? I'd want to know, again, a bit more about like when that happens on the pitch. Does it get worse? How does it impact the players' performance, their behaviours, the decisions they make, the actions they take? So it's really about trying to kind of paint a picture to understand how the player's feeling, what kind of thoughts they're having that they feel are disrupting their performance, so that we can kind of see like clearly what's going on before trying to kind of like dive into solutions. This could be a misconception, but there is no quick fix either.
Of course.
And I think,
unfortunately, it's what we all want, right?
I know. And I think maybe at the start of my role, that was perhaps a misconception within the team, is that, oh, you can go and speak to Sarah and then everything will be okay. But yeah, it does take time. For some people, it can take longer than others. And it is that kind of process that you need to go through. And I'd say the first stage of the work is about helping the athlete to really develop self-awareness so that they can understand themselves, what's going on in their mind. Because once they've been able to do that, that's where they can kind of bring like those tools in. So for example, when I'm working with someone in my private practice, quite often I'll kind of send them away maybe with a diary or something and just ask them to write down their thoughts and their feelings or during and after a match, so that they can really kind of see for themselves what's going on. Because it's just something we don't think about at all normally. You know, we just go out onto the pitch and we play football. We don't necessarily think and notice and recognize those thoughts, those feelings that come up for us at that time.
I cannot express how much I wish this was readily available to literally everybody, including me 10 years ago.
Totally foreshadowing the final question, Sarah, which is, how do we make sports psychology more readily available to everyone? Players really do need this, especially as we're seeing players get into the game younger and younger.
Yeah, you could have some work to do in the professional leagues, that's for sure.
Yeah, you know, we've talked about how we felt about the NWSL having a 14-year-old in its midst. So how do we make this more accessible to, you know, players, coaches, everybody?
That's a great question. I think, yeah, it's just really important to share the value of the mental side of the game, because it is such a big part of it. You know, you play football with your feet and some other parts of your body, but it's your mind that does a lot of the work. It's your mind that chooses what actions you take. It's your mind that kind of makes the decisions that you make on the pitch. It's your mind that controls a lot of things that go on. So when you get stuck and when you don't have the tools to figure these things out, it can really affect your performance, but not just at that one time. It can often snowball in longer time periods, and then that can have negative consequences, like I said earlier, on people's enjoyment and sometimes on people's well-being as well. So yeah, I just think sharing the value of sports psychology is important for different teams to kind of consider, you know, how could they bring a sports psychologist in, or how could they signpost players to see a sports psychologist if they notice, if they can see signs that, you know, a player is maybe becoming or putting too much pressure on themselves, or becoming very outcome focused, that they really kind of struggle to see like the wider picture.
Wonderful. Sarah, thank you so much. before we say goodbye, where can people find you either on social media or website? And correct me if I'm wrong, you do virtual meetings and sessions as well. So if people are interested in contacting you who hear this or know somebody who might be, where can they find you? Where can they reach out?
So yeah, I guess the social media spaces I'm on are mainly Twitter and LinkedIn. My handle for both is Sarah with an H, Sarah Knapp, which is Knapp. And then, my website has got a lot of information as well around what I do and how you can contact me, which is www.mindsetforperformance.co.uk.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Sarah. We really appreciate you joining us.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me on the show.
And that is it for this week with the Women's Soccer Show. Just a reminder to check out our Patreon. We put all the extra good stuff on there. We've got the other 8. We've got Fits and Kits that is up there. The last one we did recorded at 2 a.m. So I have no idea what I was saying. So that's a fun one to listen to. Trust me. But please do check it out. It's the price of a cup of coffee a month. And it really does help us keep giving you all of this marvelous content.
Patreon.com/The Show is our Patreon. As always, thank you, everybody. We'll see you next Wednesday for the Women's Soccer Show. I've been Sarah.
And I've been Allie.
Thanks, everyone.
Good night.
This podcast was edited by Monkey Hill Media. Visit monkeyhillmedia.com for more information.